Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions. Pastor Steve here, walking with you with the disciple Peter, digging deep into his involvement, or frankly, God's involvement of him in scriptures. Called from the Sea of Galilee, confessing that Jesus is the Christ, being able to proclaim in ministry, and also, deny Christ, but at the same time be forgiven by Christ. And then being able to go back into ministry, doing that full-time effect, and we get to see that after the Gospels. We get to see that in Acts. And if you want to open up, I'll be with you in Acts chapter 10, just kind of perusing these chapters so you can see what Peter was doing, what he was up to, and then what was his ending. And so as we have that Acts chapter 10, we want to just kind of set where the church is at this time. Acts chapter 2, you get that Peter was speaking, as we talked about yesterday, speaking to the multitudes at Pentecost, and people were cut to the heart, and they were being baptized. The church was multiplying. And as we got to see that in those first couple chapters, even the apostles, Peter was doing incredible things, and people were being ministered by the church. And then God did something radical. He pursued a man named Saul, because Saul would be a missionary to the Gentiles. So now it's not just the church in Jerusalem at the temple. It's not just the Jewish people turning towards the revelation of the Messiah. It's now the Gentiles being revealed here through Paul and his call to receive the message of the gospel and also be transformed. And so here you have these two distinct, divided cultures of people. Jewish people and Gentile people, Romans or other people outside of the Jewish ancestry. And so within you have those, you have two separately called people sent to them. Peter sent to them, James and John in Jerusalem. You have Paul sent to the Galatians and to the Ephesians and out into Turkey as we know it now, but Asia Minor. As we have those going on, Peter continues to do ministry in Jerusalem. And that's where we find ourselves in Acts chapter 10. All the while, God is preparing and calling and working on Paul to actually go to the Gentiles. And then they meet again, Paul and Peter. And you know what? They actually have a little bit of a butting heads. I don't know if you knew that. But Paul and Peter, they butt heads. You can read Galatians chapter 2 about really Paul writing against Peter and had to stand up against Peter because Peter was in Jerusalem, in the temple, in the Jewish culture there. And as he was there, he exercised understanding the gospel towards all, but also was kind of sliding back towards a gospel towards the Jews. And Paul met that, and he clashed with that. We're not going to go into that today, but just to know that these men, these disciples, these apostles, just walking in the gospel, walking in ministry, got together, refuted each other, or frankly encouraged one another, as there was absolute unity in and amongst the gospel. But sometimes even in Peter's life, there was a slide towards comfortable or what I know, and we do that as well as disciples. We get comfortable or just do what we know rather than just live within the gospel and have its effect going. So in Acts chapter 10, Peter receives another vision that he's actually been called to Cornelius. And Cornelius is this Roman centurion, which is a Gentile as well. So it's starting to uncover. He gets this vision of this blanket coming down and these animals on it. He says, kill and eat. That's what God said to him. And he says, this would be unclean. By no means, right? But God says, nothing that I do is unclean. So set aside your tradition, set aside your ritual, set aside kind of what you know, and just listen to what God has in store. And what God had in store was that he's opening the door to all people. He's opening the door of the gospel to all people. And Peter's getting that understanding. And then as he goes with Cornelius, he's ministering. More people are saved. More people are encountering this gospel. And they're cut to the heart and it's doing amazing things. While this was happening, this was about 10 years in the making as well as we get into chapter 12. I'm going to read this with you. But about 10 years after Christ's resurrection, there came another oppression within the Roman government, and the people of the way, which was the people like Peter and James and John and Paul now, they were making effect. They were around Jerusalem, they were around the temple, doing amazing ministry, Paul was going up into the, taking his missionary journeys, taking his missionary journeys and encountering people with the gospel there. And the government took effect to that. Actually, at this point, we get to see Herod, who was Herod Agrippa the First, not the one who tried Jesus, that was Antipas, and the one before that is Herod the Great. But Herod Agrippa the First had now taken, about 41 AD, he's taken over these parts of the government that these disciples are in. And he starts going after him. He actually wants to kill Peter. And so he does kill James. We'll get into that when we get into James. But he does go after Peter. And so take a listen here. Acts chapter 12. It was about this time that King Herod, Agrippa I, arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this pleased the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, during Passover, just as it was with Jesus. Interesting, right? After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked this length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were anticipating." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the brothers about this," he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there a while. He had been quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon. They now joined together and sought an audience with him. Having secured the support of Blastus, a trusted personal servant of the king, they asked for peace because they depended on the king's country for their food supply. This is just going into, Herod did not give praise to God, right, for the provision. And an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. We get to see that was 44 AD. And so not too many years here that is in passing, but Peter is now actually sought after. Now as Herod dies, as Herod Agrippa I dies in 44 AD, there's going to give some time. There's going to be some time in between the understanding of what Peter could do in his ministry, and it continues to go on. He gets the Council of Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15. He is still in Jerusalem, being able to manage, to be able to actually oversee, proclaim the message of the gospel in the church in Jerusalem. And frankly, history has it, a historian has it, his name is Hegesippus. Hegesippus is the only historian that speaks towards Peter and the end of the life of Peter. But he gives this account in the Fox's Book of Martyrs. It's a great account of just the persecution of the church. Here it says, "The only account that we have of martyrdom of the Apostle Peter is from the early Christian writer Hegesippus. His account includes a miraculous appearance by Christ. It seems that when Peter was old, because of John chapter 21, verse 18, it says, when you are old, they're going to address you. Nero, who is in the 60s, right, of Roman governance, Nero planned to put him to death. When the disciples heard of this, they begged Peter to flee the city, said to be Rome at that time, which he did after much pleading by the disciples. But when he got to the city gate, he saw Christ walking toward him. Peter fell to his knees and said, "Lord, where are you going?" Christ answered, "I've come to be crucified again." By this, Peter understood that it was his time to suffer the death by which Jesus had told him he would glorify God, which is John 21, verse 19. It says it's going to outstretch his arms. If you take a look at that gospel, it's going to outstretch his arm. You're going to get dressed by other people that will dress you. And as you outstretch your arms, you will die for the glory of God. And outstretching arms, we get to understand what that means in Roman culture and his history. That means he'd be crucified. So after being captured and taken to his place of martyrdom, Peter requested, that he be crucified in an upside down position, because he did not consider himself worthy to be crucified in the same position as the Lord. And so we get to see under Roman persecution, Peter martyred, Peter pursued, and he died a martyr's death, and he died crucified upside down. Now, within that, you get to say, man, how do we make sense of what this devotion can be about? It's this, and you're going to hear this almost every single Friday if you're doing in linear parts, but you're going to see this at the end of each disciple. They went to their death because of the proclamation of the gospel. They went to their death because they were witnesses of God's revelation, his kingdom being revealed in the risen Christ. They did not recant. They did not change their mind. They did not change their words. They lived lives of faith even unto death, because what they saw, what they heard in the risen Christ came together as truth, facts, revelation. And they were willing to go to their death to be able to continue to live that out, proclaim that out. It doesn't matter what Rome does. It doesn't matter what the Jewish leaders do at that time. What matters is that we don't recant or sidetrack the truth that Jesus Christ is alive. He is with us, and he is still doing ministry. The reason why I say it's great to be able to get into devotion is this. Those words are ever true this day for you and me as disciples. May we walk towards what could be our death. Maybe not because of our faith, but as we walk towards death, may we just truthfully proclaim with our lives, with our actions, with our words, Christ is risen, he is with me, and he's still doing his ministry of transforming lives by the gospel. Lord, how would you use me? You used Peter in an awesome and significant and amazing way. And yet Peter was mere man, as we are, brothers and sisters, creations of God, called by God to do the ministry of God. So blessings on your day, on your weekend, as you go into professing, living out, and just proclaiming, Christ is risen. He is with me, and he's doing ministry this day in and through me. Have a blessed day.